Long before warmth could be summoned at will, the land shaped human lives with indifference and force. The world was wide, raw, and unsoftened by any sense of safety. Wind crossed open plains without obstruction, cutting through skin and thin coverings made from scavenged hides. Stone outcrops and twisted trees offered little shelter, and even these places could not be trusted. Every sound carried meaning. Every shadow suggested movement. To exist in this landscape was to remain alert, because stillness often meant death. Humans were not rulers of this world. They were small groups moving cautiously through territories already claimed by stronger, faster, and better armed creatures. Their bodies bore no natural weapons. Claws were replaced by fingers, fangs by blunt teeth. Speed was limited, strength uncertain. Survival depended on awareness rather than dominance. Eyes scanned constantly. Ears listened for the slightest shift in grass or stone. A snapped twig could end a life, not because of the sound itself, but because of what it might announce. Cold defined the rhythm of existence. During daylight, movement was possible. The sun offered not comfort but opportunity. It allowed visibility, a chance to see danger before it struck. Hunting and gathering happened quickly and cautiously, never far from a route of escape. Food was never abundant, only briefly secured. A successful kill brought relief, not celebration, because blood carried scent, and scent carried attention. The living shared the land with those always ready to take. Night transformed the world into something else entirely. As the light faded, familiar shapes dissolved into uncertainty. The horizon disappeared. Distance lost meaning. Darkness belonged to others. Eyes reflected faint starlight. Breathing sounded closer than it should. The air itself seemed to move with intention. Humans withdrew into silence, pressing close together, not for warmth alone, but to reduce the chance of being noticed. Even then, sleep came in fragments. Rest was shallow, interrupted by instinct and fear. Luck played a role larger than skill. A sudden storm could scatter predators, or it could drive them closer. A missed sound might mean nothing, or it might mean everything. Children learned early to stay quiet, to watch faces rather than ask questions. The old carried knowledge earned through survival, not comfort. Which paths were safer? Which times were worse? Which places were never to be returned to? These lessons were not spoken often, but they were understood. The land itself seemed to hunt. Ice crept into bones. Hunger sharpened tempers and dulled judgment. Injury rarely healed cleanly. Even small wounds could decide a fate over days. There was no sense of future beyond the next sunrise. Planning was limited to survival through the coming hours. The idea of control over nature had no meaning. Nature was not something to master. It was something to endure. In this world, human life existed in a narrow space between chance and caution. The group mattered because isolation meant vulnerability. Yet even together, they were never secure. They moved, always aware that staying too long invited discovery. Camps were temporary. Footprints were erased when possible. Nothing was built to last because nothing was expected to. And beneath all of this, unspoken but constant, was tension. Not panic, not despair, but a steady pressure that shaped every decision. A sense that something unseen held power over every breath. That survival was borrowed, not owned. The world had rules, and humans had not written them. This was existence before change, before protection, before light could be carried. A time when darkness decided everything and humanity waited, without knowing it, on the edge of a moment that would fracture this balance forever. The change did not arrive gently, nor did it announce itself with purpose. It came as disruption, sudden and violent, tearing through the familiar order of fear. The sky split open without warning, and sound followed light so intense it seemed to strike the ground itself. The air burned with a sharp, unfamiliar scent. Somewhere beyond the edge of sight, the land ignited. What had once been darkness became movement and colour, leaping and alive. At first, distance kept it tolerable. From far away, the brightness pulsed against the night like something alive but contained. Animals reacted before humans did. The usual patterns broke. Predators fled, confused by a force that did not behave like prey. The ground crackled. Trees shed sparks. Heat rolled outward in waves that could be felt long before they could be understood. Instinct demanded retreat. Everything in the human body recognized danger. Yet something interrupted that instinct. The absence of pursuit. The unfamiliar quiet that followed the chaos. Where fear once pressed close, there was now space. The glowing edge of destruction created a boundary no living thing crossed. From behind rocks and earth, eyes watched. No teeth flashed. No shapes moved through the dark toward them. The fire stood alone. Caution turned into hesitation. Hesitation into observation. The flames shifted constantly, never still, yet bound to the ground in a way animals were not. They consumed what lay in their path, but slowly, predictably. Embers scattered, fading as they landed. Smoke rose and vanished into the sky. This was not a hunter. It did not stalk. It did not chase. When the violence of the blaze weakened, what remained was smaller, quieter, and strangely inviting. A fallen branch burned at one end, its glow steady. The surrounding earth was warm, not hostile. One figure stepped closer than the rest, then stopped. The heat pushed back, but it did not strike. Another step followed, breath held, muscles ready to run. Nothing happened. The light revealed more than danger. It revealed detail. Hands became visible. Faces emerged from shadow. The ground took shape again. Fear loosened its grip just enough to allow curiosity through. The branch crackled softly, breaking apart but not exploding. When it fell, it left behind glowing fragments that lingered instead of disappearing. A hand reached toward the warmth and pulled back quickly, startled but unharmed. Pain existed, but it was immediate and instructive, not fatal. This thing warned before it punished. That alone made it different. Stones placed near it grew hot. Cold retreated in its presence. The night no longer swallowed everything whole. Someone moved a fragment with a stick. It responded, shifting its glow without resistance. The realization was not sudden or verbal. It formed slowly, across repeated moments of approach and retreat. This force did not act on its own terms alone. It responded. It could be guided, fed, diminished. Fear did not vanish. It transformed. What stood before them was powerful, capable of destruction beyond any creature they knew. But it was also consistent. It followed rules, and rules could be learned. The moment was fragile. One wrong movement could have ended it, but it did not. Instead, the fire remained. Watched, tested, accepted at a distance. In that silent exchange, something shifted in the human mind. For the first time, a force of nature had not only been survived, but approached. Not conquered, but engaged. Without ceremony or awareness of its weight, the world tilted. The darkness no longer held complete authority. A new presence had entered human life, and it would not leave. The fragile glow became the center of attention, fragile yet commanding, as if the night itself had been replaced by something to be treasured rather than feared. Sparks were collected with care, carried in hollowed bark or stone hollows, guarded as though they were living creatures. The warmth was no longer a gift of chance. It became responsibility. Whoever held it held more than light. They held life. Every ember was precious, capable of sustaining or abandoning a group depending on its survival. The task of protection fell unevenly across the small bands. Some kept vigil at night, eyes never leaving the glow, bodies tense yet deliberate. Others carried embers during movement, shielding them from wind, rain, and careless accident. Even the young learned the rituals, how to approach without startling, how to breathe without scattering heat or ash, how to feed the flames with small sticks that would burn slowly rather than rage unpredictably. It became a rhythm of life, a constant attention that demanded both patience and precision. Loss brought sudden despair. A dropped ember in the darkness could mean hours of shivering and fear, the return of hunted nights where every step might be the last. The group would gather frantically, searching the ground, coaxing what little glow remained back to life. Smoke alone became a signal of disaster. The absence of fire transformed the familiar landscape into a hostile alien place, and the creatures that prowled it seemed to sense the vulnerability immediately. Hunger was terrible, but cold without warmth was devastating. Soon the fire's value outstripped even food. A small preserved ember could sustain a group longer than a handful of roots or a scavenged carcass. Decisions shifted. Foraging was tempered by the need to protect the flame. Night movement was limited. Arguments arose, tempered quickly by the shared understanding that no dispute could justify the risk of losing it. The fire dictated schedules, routines, and attention, reshaping human behavior in ways invisible to outsiders. Even as fire spread to multiple points, each glowing fragment demanded care. Rival groups might covet an ember, not merely for survival, but for the dominance it represented. Protection became a matter of both pride and necessity. Strategies emerged. Multiple carriers, layered defences, observation posts. Some of the cleverest among them found ways to shelter fire with earth and stone, or to keep small fragments smouldering beneath leaves, hidden from sight yet ready to burst back into life. Gradually a new hierarchy formed around the flame. Those who understood its temperament, who could coax it from weakness and sustain it through wind or dampness, gained respect. Knowledge became power. Which twigs burned longest, how to reignite embers from ash, how to prevent its escape into the night. This expertise was as vital as the skill of hunting or tracking. The group depended upon it, and dependence bred reverence. The fire itself seemed to respond to human care, feeding on attention and creating comfort in return. Its warmth extended bodies, allowing more movement after dusk. Shadows no longer consumed the camp. Humans discovered a sense of timing that had not existed. Moments to rest, to cook, to watch and plan. It was a new dimension of control, yet delicate. One error, a dropped log, an unshielded ember, could erase everything in an instant. In these moments, humans began to see themselves not only as creatures of the land, but as stewards of a force more potent than any hunted prey. The flame became the measure of their ingenuity, patience and courage. Its survival was more urgent than any meal, its guidance more reliable than the stars. In guarding fire, humans first felt what it was to hold power, both terrifying and sustaining, fragile and enduring, a gift that demanded vigilance yet promised dominion. For the first time, darkness no longer held unquestioned authority. The glow of fire pushed back the night, and with it came a strange new sense of safety. Predators, once relentless and unseen, kept their distance. The low murmur of distant claws or the rustle of leaves no longer made hearts pound with immediate dread. Even the sharpest ears could relax, if only slightly, as the warmth created a barrier that life could depend upon. Shadows were still present, but they were no longer all-consuming. They had edges, boundaries defined by light. Human groups began to linger where fire was maintained. Camps, once temporary shelters, started to feel permanent. Stones and sticks were arranged with purpose, not only to hold tents or lean-together shelters, but also to frame the fire in ways that extended its protection. Paths within the camp became habitual. Certain spots were designated for the flame itself, a sacred circle of light that defined the heart of the group. The perimeter of safety grew outward from that centre, and within it people dared to relax, to stretch, to breathe without constant tension. Sleep itself began to change. Where once it was a fragmented and vigilant practice, rest now extended through longer stretches of darkness. The mind, free from the immediate terror of predators, began to wander into other thoughts. Memories, plans, stories. The safety that fire provided allowed imagination to flourish. Human consciousness, no longer entirely consumed by survival, began to consider the past and the future simultaneously. Dreams became less about fleeing and more about wonder, about the group's shared experiences, and about questions yet unasked. The emotional world shifted quietly but profoundly. Fire introduced a spectrum of feelings that had been inaccessible before. Relief, curiosity, admiration, even playfulness emerged in response to the light and warmth. Laughter, once rare and brief, began to echo around the flames, bonds tightened. The group's cohesion grew not only out of necessity, but from mutual recognition of the comfort that fire enabled. Discussions about hunts, tools, or territory now carried warmth and attention that extended beyond immediate survival. The glow also offered a mirror to human expression. Faces illuminated in firelight became familiar and reassuring rather than threatening. Gestures and glances could be read with subtlety. A child learning to imitate an elder could now be observed safely. Instructions for daily tasks became more precise, more deliberate. Knowledge that once depended solely on repeated trials in daylight could now be passed during the night. The accumulation of skills accelerated because the mind and senses had more time and less fear to devote to learning. Even the perception of distance transformed. Where darkness once erased boundaries and made the world unpredictable, fire drew circles of clarity. Danger was no longer infinite. It was segmented, comprehensible, and contained. Humans felt agency for the first time. They could influence the night. They could push back against uncertainty. They could carve spaces where life continued uninterrupted. In this way, fire did more than illuminate. It reshaped the interior landscape of human experience. Courage and confidence began to emerge, faint but persistent. Emotional resilience developed alongside physical adaptation. The night, long a realm of terror and unpredictability, became a canvas upon which humans could project not only caution but creativity, strategy, and care. By holding fire, humans discovered a new form of power, one that did not demand conquest over nature through force, but rather negotiation, stewardship, and understanding. A single flame had the authority to redefine the relationship between life and night, transforming fear into an opportunity for growth, reflection, and connection. In this glow, humanity first glimpsed the potential of shaping the world to meet its own needs, rather than existing solely at its mercy. The discovery of fire's warmth brought more than safety. It brought transformation in the body itself. Food, once consumed raw and coarse, became malleable under heat. Roots, tubers, and tough fibers softened, breaking down in ways that hands alone could not achieve. Meat released flavors and textures previously inaccessible, and its toughness yielded to careful roasting. The act of cooking was not merely convenience, it was a form of alchemy, turning the same ingredients into something richer, more nourishing, more digestible. Teeth, once large and robust for tearing raw plants and meat, began to lose some of their defensive purpose. Jaws, previously wide and strong to crush hard food, grew less massive over generations as cooking reduced the labor required to chew. Bones that had endured constant strain now experienced relief, and muscles adapted to a new rhythm of consumption. Digestion became more efficient. Fewer calories were wasted on breaking down raw cellulose or sinew. Nutrients once locked within tough fibers became available in abundance. The brain, demanding as it was, responded to this newfound energy. Previously constrained by limited caloric intake, early humans now had a resource that allowed cognition to expand. Problem-solving sharpened, planning grew more elaborate, and attention spans lengthened. The same fire that protected life now nurtured intellect, quietly offering a foundation for thought that went beyond mere survival. Nights could be spent observing patterns, crafting tools, or discussing the world around the fire. Learning, memory, and strategy all gained momentum alongside improved nutrition. Cooking also changed behavior in subtle but profound ways. Meals became communal rituals, occasions for sharing warmth, conversation, and care. Social bonds strengthened as individuals learned to coordinate the preparation of food, distribute portions, and monitor the fire's intensity. The body and mind, both fueled and sustained by cooked nourishment, enabled humans to invest energy in teaching, storytelling, and planning future hunts. Fire became a partner in development, influencing growth at every level, from physiology to social structure. Energy once reserved for mere survival was now available for exploration and creativity. Muscles that had labored to break down raw food could now redirect effort toward mobility, tool-making, and construction. The body grew leaner in some ways, more efficient in others, reflecting the quiet but profound influence of controlled heat. Fire did not simply alter the present, it reshaped the potential for generations to come, a subtle architect of evolution in action. Even digestion became a site of adaptation. The gut, previously strained by raw fibers and resistant proteins, grew more specialized in extracting maximum nutrition. Illness caused by spoiled or hard-to-process food diminished. Fat reserves, previously a precarious necessity, became easier to maintain. The human body began to feel more capable, stronger in its endurance, and lighter in its capacity to explore the world. With each meal cooked over fire, the mind and body became entwined with its rhythms. Humans learned to time food preparation with the cycles of day and night, to preserve embers for warmth and cooking, and to coordinate labor around the needs of the flame. Fire became as integral to survival as water or shelter, but also as central to the evolution of human potential. By transforming raw sustenance into nourishment, Fire reshaped the very architecture of life. Teeth and jaws yielded, digestion strengthened, and the brain, ever hungry for fuel, received the resources to grow in ways that would eventually make language, planning, and art possible. In the quiet glow of embers, the human body was being rewritten, imperceptibly but irreversibly, heralding a new era in which the mastery of fire became mastery of the self. The glow of fire drew people closer than any necessity alone could demand. After the tasks of the day, when hunting and gathering had ended and the cold began to bite, humans clustered around the flames, forming a circle that felt both intimate and protective. Shadows danced across faces, highlighting expressions in a way that daylight rarely did, and eyes met more often, lingering on subtle gestures that conveyed meaning beyond simple words or sounds. The fire became a focal point, holding attention and offering a shared space for observation and exchange. Conversations lengthened in the presence of warmth. Stories of the day, what had been hunted, what had been lost, what had frightened the group, were repeated and elaborated upon. Each account became richer as others added details, mimed actions, or reacted with laughter or alarm. Language, tentative and fragmented, gained momentum. Repetition taught structure, gestures emphasized meaning, and the fire's glow ensured that everyone remained attentive. Even silence carried purpose. Eyes and hands spoke when words could not, and every nuance became part of the shared understanding. The day no longer ended with dusk. Fire extended waking hours into the deep night, transforming time itself. With light available after the sun had disappeared, humans could reflect on their experiences, plan for the next day, and teach younger members more effectively. Lessons about tools, hunting strategies, or safe paths could now be given under the steady glow, without the pressure of the immediate survival pressing in. This extension of activity created room for subtlety, for complex expression, for the beginnings of syntax and nuance that might otherwise have remained impossible. Fire also encouraged repetition, experimentation, and memory. Words were tested, sounds were repeated, gestures became standardized. The presence of warmth reduced fear, allowing minds to focus on social cohesion and instruction rather than mere survival. Early stories became scaffolds for language itself, offering structure to ideas that had previously existed only in immediate necessity. Humor, warning, explanation, and imitation were all possible because the circle offered both safety and attention, a contained environment in which communication could flourish. Emotion intertwined with speech. Faces illuminated by fire showed concern, amusement, curiosity, and awe in ways that strengthened understanding. Vocalizations paired with gestures became increasingly precise. Subtle differences in tone began to carry meaning. The group learned to recognize patterns in sound, associating them with people, objects, or actions. This shared cognition, reinforced nightly around the fire, laid the foundation for memory, abstract thought, and cooperation beyond immediate tasks. Stories of past hunts, imagined dangers, and explanations of natural phenomena circulated, building a communal knowledge that could be carried forward. As the circle grew more habitual, humans began to anticipate sequences, beginnings, climaxes, resolutions. Language gained rhythm and order. The fire not only illuminated faces, but illuminated thought itself, giving rise to structured expression that extended beyond immediate survival. The circle fostered attention and social learning. Younger members imitated older ones, absorbing gestures, sounds, and expressions. Repetition around the flame created patterns in mind and voice, reinforcing the memory and comprehension. Debate, persuasion, and narrative experimentation became possible, creating fertile ground for language to take root and flourish. In this way, fire became the midwife of communication. It provided time, light, and safety, allowing humans to transform fleeting sounds into shared meaning. It was more than warmth or protection. It was a teacher, shaping the way early humans could connect, plan, and imagine. In the quiet pulse of the fire circle, the first sparks of language ignited, linking minds together and opening a path toward thought, culture, and civilization. Fire's role evolved from refuge to tool, a force that could be wielded rather than merely tended. Humans discovered that controlled flames could alter the environment itself, shaping the movements of animals and the availability of resources. Grasses, underbrush, and scattered wood were burned deliberately, creating barriers and funnels. Herds, startled by the sudden light and heat, fled predictably along paths humans had observed and sometimes even directed. The same force that once protected humans now became a way to manipulate the world around them. Hunting strategies transformed. Ambushes no longer relied solely on stealth and patience. Fire could drive animals toward prepared positions, limiting their options and increasing human success. Hunters coordinated actions around the glow, tracking smoke patterns and listening to the reactions of prey. The landscape became a partner in predation, reshaped moment by moment by the interplay of flame and human ingenuity. Success did not come from brute strength alone, but from understanding and guiding the fire's effect on both the land and its inhabitants. Humans began to recognize their growing influence over entire ecosystems. Burned patches encouraged new growth of plants, favored for food or shelter. Predators found their hunting grounds altered and less reliable. Fire became a tool of control, extending human presence and influence far beyond the immediate circle of the camp. Observation, experimentation, and planning merged, allowing early humans to anticipate natural responses to their actions. They were no longer entirely at the mercy of the world. They were beginning to bend it to their needs. The mastery of fire as a weapon also demanded new levels of cooperation. Coordinating burns, protecting the advancing flames, and timing hunts required communication and careful strategy. Mistakes could be catastrophic. Fire could rage beyond control, consume resources, or harm the hunters themselves. But when wielded successfully, it amplified their capabilities, giving them advantages that no other creature possessed. Humans learned to measure, guide, and respect the force they commanded, recognizing both its potential and its danger. This shift marked a profound change in perspective. Once the hunted, humans now understood the possibility of becoming the hunters in a larger, more deliberate sense. Knowledge of terrain, animal behavior, and fire's power merged to create a level of dominance unprecedented in their history. The landscape itself was no longer simply a backdrop. It became a canvas for strategy, manipulation, and sustained advantage. Over time, repeated use of fire in hunting reshaped migration patterns and ecological balances. Certain animals avoided burned areas, while new plant growth encouraged others to settle. Humans began to influence the succession of species in the regions they occupied. The flame that had first offered safety was now a force with the capacity to alter life itself, an early step in humanity's ongoing reshaping of the planet. With fire, humans could extend influence across time and space. A single well-placed blaze could determine the movements of a herd for days or even weeks, could change the composition of a forest or grassland. The combination of intellect, observation, and controlled heat elevated humans from reactive participants in nature to proactive agents. For the first time, they had a means to impose strategy over chaos. In this transformation, humans glimpsed the power of foresight and planning at scale. Fire as a weapon was more than a tool for immediate survival. It was the instrument by which they began to assert their presence over the world, laying the foundation for civilizations yet to come. The balance of predator and prey had shifted, and with it, the trajectory of human destiny began to bend in ways no creature had anticipated. Fire became a companion on journeys that would have been impossible without its steady warmth. As humans ventured beyond familiar lands, they encountered cold winds that cut through skin and bone, snow that blanketed the earth in blinding white, and nights that seemed endless. The same embers that had illuminated camps now offered protection against frost, allowing travel and survival in climates that had once been barriers to expansion. With fire, humans could endure cold nights, dry damp hides, and maintain life where raw exposure would have meant certain death. Migration beyond Africa brought humans into landscapes starkly different from the warmth of their origins. Mountains, tundras, and glaciers demanded adaptation on every level. Food sources were scattered and scarce, shelter was minimal, and weather was unpredictable. Fire became the center around which survival strategies coalesced. It provided heat for cooking, which ensured maximum energy from limited food. It allowed people to stay awake longer, tending to young, scouting the area, and preparing shelters before darkness could overtake them. The flame extended the day and created a buffer between life and death. Clothing and shelters transformed alongside fire. Animal hides were softened over the embers, stitched and layered to preserve warmth. Tents and rudimentary structures were reinforced and insulated with knowledge of how heat circulated, how smoke exited, and how embers could be preserved. Even temporary shelters became functional living spaces, centered on the glow that defined safe ground. Groups learned to carry embers carefully, maintaining warmth during travel and using the flame as a symbol of continuity in an otherwise hostile environment. Fire acted as a passport, enabling humans to enter regions that had previously been off-limits. Rivers frozen over could be crossed with warmth preserved at night. Valleys blanketed in snow could be explored safely. Cliffs and plateaus once unapproachable became manageable through careful placement of fire and human ingenuity. With it, they brought light, heat, and nourishment to the edges of the world. In every new land, fire established the foundation for life, permitting not only survival but growth and exploration. The presence of fire also altered social structures during migration. Groups needed coordination to transport embers, feed flames, and protect against accidental loss. Leadership and cooperation emerged, guided by the understanding that the survival of all depended on careful attention to the same fragile resource. Fire became a central node of planning, a constant in an otherwise unpredictable journey. Without it, the cold could have fractured groups and scattered populations. With it, humans moved confidently, leaving traces of warmth wherever they travelled. The ability to maintain fire across distances also encouraged cultural continuity. Knowledge of techniques, strategies, and survival practices was preserved and shared, becoming portable intelligence that travelled with the group. Skills honed in one climate could be adapted for another. The flame became both practical and symbolic, a tether to past experience and a beacon guiding future possibilities. In this way, fire transformed migration from mere movement into conquest of new worlds. Humans were no longer confined to temperate zones or reliant solely on natural shelters. They carried life itself in their hands, a portable essence that made even the coldest, harshest regions habitable. Fire extended the reach of human ambition and curiosity, creating a pathway across deserts, mountains, and frozen plains. The world, vast and unwelcoming, became accessible, and humans, once limited by climate, were free to spread across the entire Earth. Through warmth and light, fire enabled a new era of exploration. It was the invisible passport that allowed humans to inhabit icy realms, adapt to new challenges, and extend their presence far beyond the cradle of their origin. Wherever the flame travelled, survival followed, and with survival came the first glimmers of permanence in places that had once been uninhabitable. Fire was no longer just a tool, it was the key to a boundless world. Fire, while a source of warmth and sustenance, was never benign. Its glow could comfort, but its rage could destroy. A careless ember could ignite grasslands, forests, or entire camps. Sparks that escaped vigilance sometimes roared into roaring flames, consuming food stores, shelters, and even lives. Early humans quickly learned that fire was unpredictable, and the cost of mismanagement was immediate and severe. Each incident left lasting impressions, teaching lessons etched into memory. Survival depended not only on knowing fire, but on respecting its limits. Communities began to recognize that fire required rules. It could not be tended haphazardly. Responsibilities were assigned, sometimes formally, sometimes by unspoken consensus. One person maintained the central flame, another monitored the edges, while others collected fuel. Night watches became essential. Accidents could no longer be shrugged off. Negligence meant devastation. The group's safety, their warmth, and their sustenance were entwined with the care given to the flame. Early humans were forced to develop discipline in ways that extended far beyond fire itself. With each controlled blaze, understanding grew. People learned to anticipate behavior, which materials burned fastest, how wind could spread flames, and how embers could be preserved through damp or cold. Knowledge became power, and power demanded responsibility. The consequences of misuse were immediate and stark: scorched land, lost resources, and weakened communities. Each mistake reinforced the lesson that power, though desirable, was not without cost. Humans came to realize that even their greatest ally could become their greatest threat. Fire's dual nature shaped the development of decision-making and foresight. Survival was no longer a matter of reacting alone, it became a matter of planning, judgment, and caution. Groups had to coordinate in fuel collection, placement of fires, and safeguarding against natural hazards. A lapse in judgment could lead to destruction, yet careful guidance could transform fire into a tool of unparalleled utility. This delicate balance fostered an early understanding of ethics, responsibility, and the consequences of one's actions. The very experience of danger also taught respect. Flames could be mesmerizing, but awe mixed with fear kept hubris in check. Overconfidence led to disasters. Humility encouraged careful observation and patience. Fire became both teacher and test, revealing character through the way people responded to its demands. Those who ignored its temperament learned quickly, often painfully, that mastery required vigilance and respect. In parallel, humans began to internalize the broader lesson. Every act of power carries consequence. The management of fire mirrored larger truths about influence over the environment, social dynamics, and survival itself. Decisions that affected the flame affected the group. The ripple of care or neglect extended outward, shaping not only immediate safety but future opportunities for exploration, sustenance, and growth. Through trial, error, and attentive observation, early humans began to establish patterns and protocols, creating the first systems of control. Fire was no longer a random force of nature but a shared responsibility, an extension of human agency. It demanded attention, judgment, and restraint, forcing groups to develop coordination, planning, and foresight. In learning to live with fire's destructive potential, humanity encountered the essential truth of power. It could create, but it could also annihilate. The gift of fire was immense, yet it was not free. Through fire, humans first confronted the notion that control brings both opportunity and obligation, and that mastery comes with consequences that cannot be ignored. This dangerous gift, held carefully and respected, became the foundation for the first lessons in human responsibility, foresight, and the ethical dimensions of power. The fire that once flickered in fragile embers at the center of a small human circle now stretches across the world in forms both familiar and unimaginable. From the earliest campfires to the blazing furnaces that smelt metals, from the engines that propel ships and trains to the lights that brighten cities, fire remains at the core of human achievement. It has become both symbol and instrument, a constant companion in the shaping of societies and the expansion of knowledge. Its presence is felt in every hearth, every factory, and every flickering bulb that illuminates the night. Civilization itself is built upon fire's enduring power. It enabled agriculture, metallurgy, and industry. It transformed simple shelters into homes and villages into sprawling cities. Fire provided the energy to forge tools, craft art, and construct structures that outlasted generations. It catalyzed trade, technology, and invention, each advancement tracing a line back to those first careful embers carried by cautious hands. Humanity learned not only to survive with fire, but to rely upon it, to integrate it into daily life in ways that would have seemed miraculous to their ancestors. Yet fire's power is dual, capable of creation and destruction alike. It warms bodies and cooks food, but it also fuels engines of war and spreads devastation when misused. Entire landscapes have been reshaped, and civilizations have risen or fallen depending on the management or mismanagement of flame. The same element that permitted early humans to extend nights of safety and exploration now powers modern machines, furnishes heat to homes, and provides light to cities that never sleep. Its influence extends from the most intimate spaces to global systems, a reminder that mastery brings both progress and responsibility. Through all these transformations, the essence of fire remains unchanged. Its unpredictability demands attention, its energy offers opportunity. Humans have learned to guide it, contain it, and harness it in ways unimaginable to those who first approached a glowing ember in the dark. Yet even as technology has advanced, the origin of this power remains humble, a spark discovered, tended, and respected in the quiet of a prehistoric night. Every modern flame, every burst of light or heat, carries the memory of that first interaction between human curiosity and natural force. The story of fire is also the story of humanity itself. With it, humans shifted from prey to predator, from wanderers to settlers, from creatures of instinct to architects of civilization. It taught lessons about caution, cooperation, and foresight. It offered warmth and nourishment, reshaping bodies and minds alike. It fostered language, social bonds, and knowledge that could be carried across generations. In fire, humans discovered a force that reflected their own potential, powerful, transformative, and demanding of respect. Even now, every flicker of flame, every glowing coil of electricity, every controlled explosion in industry or transport is a descendant of that original light. It reminds us that all human achievement, all progress, and all civilization stems from a moment when a small group of humans first dared to approach, to protect, and to understand the fire that would redefine their existence. The flame still burns, not merely in hearths or engines, but in the heart of human ingenuity, curiosity, and ambition. It is the thread that connects our present to our distant past, the eternal witness to a journey that began with a spark and continues to illuminate the path of human destiny. Around 200,000 years ago, the land we now call Africa was a vast mosaic of forests, rivers, and open plains, alive with sounds of creatures that had long since vanished. Amidst the swaying grasses and dense canopies, early humans moved cautiously, their steps measured, their eyes alert to both prey and predator. They were not the fully modern humans we imagine, yet neither were they primitive in mind or spirit. They carried within them the spark of curiosity, the need to explore, and the instinct to survive in a world that offered both abundance and peril. Each day brought new challenges, tracking herds of antelope across shifting landscapes, seeking clean water in distant rivers, and learning which plants could sustain life and which could bring swift death. The skies above shifted with seasons that reshaped the terrain. Wet periods turned the savannas into lush expanses, while prolonged droughts forced movement toward regions unknown. Our ancestors navigated these changes without maps, guided by memory, the sun, and the subtle signs of nature. They observed the flight of birds, the direction of winds, and the patterns of animal migration, creating a mental map that stretched far beyond their immediate surroundings. Every night, as darkness fell over the land, they gathered around flickering fires, sharing silent glances and unspoken knowledge, learning to cooperate in ways that would define the future of humanity. Yet, for all their activity and ingenuity, almost nothing remains to mark their passage. Tools of stone and bone may survive in scattered fragments, but the stories of daily life, the laughter of a child, the tension of a hunt, the quiet moments of reflection beside a river, have been swallowed by time. It is in this gap, this vast stretch of human existence without written record, that the greatest mystery lies. What rituals shaped their minds? How did they communicate ideas that could not yet be written? What dreams flickered behind their eyes as they gazed at the stars, wondering about the movements of the sun and moon? The immensity of this unrecorded era forces the modern imagination to wander. Scholars and archaeologists can trace footprints, remnants of fire, and scattered tools, yet these are but whispers of a civilization invisible to history. For every fossilized bone, countless stories are lost, an invisible culture that thrived, adapted, and perhaps even flourished in ways we can only guess. The silence of this time is profound. It invites speculation and compels awe. In contemplating the lost 100,000 years before recorded history, one cannot help but feel the weight of absence. Humanity, in its earliest form, existed in a world unshaped by writing, unbound by cities, and untouched by the conventions of civilization that would emerge tens of thousands of years later. Yet the people of this era were real, active, and deliberate, living lives full of discovery, danger, and quiet triumphs. The question that haunts modern understanding is simple yet staggering. In a time so vast and so underexplored, what remarkable human stories, insights, and innovations were created, only to vanish without a trace, leaving us to reconstruct their world from fragments of earth, bone, and stone. Beyond the familiar landscapes of Africa, a restless movement began, driven by instinct, curiosity, and the subtle pressures of survival. Small bands of humans ventured into territories they had never seen, leaving behind the only home they had ever known. The journey was neither swift nor straightforward. They crossed rugged mountains whose jagged peaks tore at the sky, waded through rivers swollen with seasonal rains, and braved deserts where the sun scorched the earth and water was a fleeting promise. Each step carried the risk of hunger, disease, and encounters with predators far more formidable than themselves. Lions, hyenas, and other large carnivores roamed these lands, observing the newcomers as much as the humans observed them, and every miscalculation could end in death. Despite these perils, early humans adapted in extraordinary ways. They learned to read the subtle signs of the environment, the tracks of animals, the drift of clouds, the direction of the wind. Shelter became essential. Natural caves, overhangs, and eventually rudimentary constructions offered refuge from the elements and predators alike. Fire, still a newly mastered tool, served as protection, warmth, and a gathering point for shared knowledge. With each passing season, humans pushed further into unknown lands, developing strategies to hunt unfamiliar creatures, gather new types of plants, and navigate regions without any prior guidance. Archaeological evidence hints at their far-reaching journeys. Footprints fossilized in mud thousands of years ago show humans traversing continents far from Africa, yet the absence of written record leaves an eerie silence. How did they know where to go? How did they survive winters harsher than any experienced at home, or cross rivers teeming with unseen dangers? The questions persist because tangible records are almost non-existent. Each migration was a gamble, a test of resilience and ingenuity, and every surviving artifact is a testament to lives lived at the edge of the known world. The expanses they travelled were often unforgiving. Shifting ice sheets, volcanic activity, and treacherous terrain demanded constant movement and adaptation. Humans relied on keen observation, memory, and a deep understanding of animal behaviour to locate food and avoid hazards. They learned the rhythms of seasonal change, tracking the movement of herds and the blossoming of edible plants, often anticipating events years in advance based on experience passed from one generation to the next. This silent communication, transmitted through gestures, sounds, and mimicry, became the framework for cooperation that would sustain them across vast, uncharted regions. In the absence of cities, roads, or written maps, each journey was an act of courage and improvisation. The scattered evidence left behind, tools fashioned from stone, subtle marks of temporary shelters, and traces of fire, offers tantalizing glimpses into the lives of these pioneers. Their legacy is a story written in footprints, not parchment, a history preserved in the shifting sands of time rather than in archives. As humans spread across continents, they left faint yet undeniable marks of presence, a silent testimony to survival against the odds. Every step into unknown lands was a confrontation with uncertainty, a negotiation with the environment, and a declaration of human tenacity. The mystery of their existence in distant territories lingers. How did they persevere, innovate, and thrive in landscapes that held nothing familiar, no guideposts, no assurance? Theirs was a journey without precedent, and every trace they left invites wonder at the courage and adaptability of our ancestors. As humans pressed further into lands already inhabited by other human species, they encountered beings who were both familiar and alien. Neanderthals, stocky and muscular, moved with the confidence of creatures perfectly adapted to cold European forests, while the elusive Denisovans left traces only in caves and fragments of bone. To the early modern humans venturing into these territories, these encounters must have been moments of awe, fear, and profound curiosity. Some meetings may have been tense standoffs, eyes locked across firelit clearings, each party measuring the other's strength and intent. Other encounters might have been more subtle, opportunities for exchange of knowledge, techniques, and survival strategies that were as valuable as any tool or weapon. Evidence for these interactions is scarce, leaving only tantalizing hints behind. DNA extracted from fossils tells a story invisible to the eye. Our ancestors interbred with Neanderthals and Denisovans, weaving their genetic legacy into the tapestry of modern humans. This invisible thread suggests more than simple coexistence. It implies encounters that shaped not just survival, but identity, adaptation, and the subtle inheritance of traits that would influence generations to come. Yet the archaeological record offers only fragments, tools, hearths, and faint traces of campsites, allowing only partial glimpses into these ancient meetings. One can imagine the silence in which exchanges occurred, the careful observation, the cautious mimicry of unfamiliar techniques, and the tentative trust required to share knowledge in a world where miscalculation could be fatal. These interactions were shaped by environment as much as by temperament. Harsh climates demanded cooperation when resources were scarce, but competition surely arose when hunting grounds overlapped. Perhaps early humans learned the art of stone tool refinement from neighbours, or discovered new methods of clothing and shelter in exchange or imitation. Perhaps they absorbed lessons in fire management, foraging, or hunting strategies that allowed them to thrive in unfamiliar landscapes. At the same time, cultural differences may have sparked conflicts or inspired avoidance, a dance of caution and opportunity that left only whispers in the bones and sediments of prehistoric sites. Caves that once served as shelters still hold faint markings of these shared spaces. Hand stencils, charcoal lines, and stone tools suggest both simultaneous occupation and sequential habitation, hinting at interactions without giving specifics. Did they communicate through gestures, sounds, or early language? Did they recognize kinship in one another, or did survival instincts dominate every encounter? These questions linger, unresolved, as researchers painstakingly piece together a story from what little has endured. The presence of these other humans also reshaped migration and adaptation. Facing populations already adapted to cold or high-altitude environments, modern humans had to innovate, borrowing strategies for survival, adjusting hunting techniques, and navigating unfamiliar terrains. Each encounter demanded flexibility of thought, a willingness to learn and adapt rapidly, and a capacity to assess risk and reward in real time. These experiences left imprints not only on the body but on the social behaviours and cultural practices that would eventually define our species. In imagining these moments, one glimpses a world alive with complexity, where multiple human species navigated the same lands, sometimes colliding, sometimes coexisting, and often leaving behind only fragments of their lives. The mystery of these encounters remains, encoded in DNA and scattered tools, challenging modern humans to reconstruct a history that is simultaneously intimate and unknowable. Within this interplay of cooperation, conflict, and quiet observation lies a crucial chapter of the lost 100,000 years, one that shaped the genetic and cultural heritage of every human alive today. In the shadows of prehistory, humans experimented endlessly with the materials around them, fashioning tools and constructing shelters that allowed them to manipulate the world in ways previously unimaginable. Flint was chipped into precise points for hunting, bones were carved into needles for sewing hides, and wood was shaped into spears capable of felling prey at a distance. Fire, long mastered, became more than a source of warmth. It was a tool of transformation, softening hides, cooking food, and perhaps even forging rudimentary metal or minerals, although evidence has been lost to the centuries. Each innovation, though seemingly simple, demanded foresight, patience, and an understanding of cause and effect, qualities that speak to a hidden genius in these early humans. Some of these creations may have been fleeting, designed for immediate need, and abandoned once they fulfilled their purpose. Others could have represented more sophisticated thought, such as structures for storage, hidden traps for hunting, or communal spaces that brought people together for planning and storytelling. The scarcity of physical remnants does not equate to scarcity of ingenuity. On the contrary, the very absence of evidence hints at a civilization that existed in transient, adaptive forms, leaving its mark not in monuments or writing, but in subtle alterations to the landscape, patterns of habitation, and innovations passed down orally or through imitation. It is possible that some inventions were astonishingly advanced yet ephemeral. Perhaps they developed systems for water collection, early forms of agriculture, or methods for preserving food that predated any known settlements. Small-scale social hierarchies may have emerged around hunting parties with leaders and specialists coordinating tasks essential to survival. Communities could have exchanged knowledge over vast distances, trading techniques for crafting tools or managing fire, creating networks of information now invisible to modern eyes. These hints suggest a complexity of thought that challenges our assumptions about primitive humans and their capacity to shape the world around them. The loss of these technologies is both tragic and tantalizing. Archaeologists uncover fragments of stone tools or fire pits, but the broader picture remains frustratingly incomplete. What kind of societies might have risen and fallen entirely before written history, leaving only the smallest traces behind? Could entire networks of trade, communication, or shared innovation have existed, only to vanish without a trace as populations moved, climates shifted, or disasters struck? These questions cast a long shadow over our understanding of the human past, revealing that survival was not merely a matter of brute force but of intellect, collaboration, and creativity. Even the tools that survive hint at the sophistication of early human minds. A finely chipped spear point reflects knowledge of leverage, force, and precision. A fire pit strategically placed near windbreaks and water demonstrates planning, environmental awareness, and foresight. Clothing fashioned from hides was tailored to specific climates, protecting against cold and heat, while shelters carved into caves or erected from branches suggest spatial reasoning and architectural instinct. Each act of ingenuity was a small revolution, a testament to the capacity of humans to innovate under conditions of uncertainty and scarcity. Imagining these lost technologies opens a window into a world of potential discoveries that may forever remain hidden. Societies capable of complex social coordination, long-distance planning, and technological creativity could have thrived for generations, yet the record is silent. Their genius, fleeting though it may have been, challenges the modern assumption that progress is linear, or that ancient humans were less capable than their descendants. In this hidden past, intelligence was practical, innovation was survival, and the potential for entire civilizations exists in the gaps of history, waiting in shadows for recognition that may never come. Over tens of thousands of years, the Earth itself became both adversary and teacher to early humans. Colossal ice sheets advanced across continents, swallowing forests and plains beneath their unyielding weight. Glaciers ground valleys into sharp edges, diverted rivers into unknown courses, and plunged the climate into brutal cold. Volcanic eruptions spewed ash across skies, darkening days and poisoning waters, while tremors and lava flows reshaped familiar landscapes in moments. These cataclysms were indiscriminate, reshaping environments faster than human populations could often adapt. For those who survived, every choice, when to move, what to eat, how to shield themselves, was a gamble with the planet itself. Communities were forced into continual motion, migrating toward temperate zones, following retreating herds, or seeking refuge in caves insulated from ice winds. Fires were tended with extreme care, sustaining warmth and cooking food in an unforgiving climate. Clothing, once simple, had to become more sophisticated, layered, and insulated against the harshness of each passing season. Every element of daily life was a negotiation with survival. Even minor miscalculations in timing or location could mean death in a single storm, blizzard, or volcanic cloud. Early humans became masters of adaptation, learning to interpret subtle signs in the environment that indicated changes in weather, animal patterns, or plant cycles. These periods of upheaval also shaped social structures. Small groups may have coalesced into larger communities for protection against predators and the elements, pooling knowledge and labor to increase survival odds. Yet the same pressures could have torn populations apart, scattering groups across regions, leaving temporary settlements to be swallowed by mudslides, ice, or lava. Entire communities could rise in fertile valleys, only to vanish within a generation due to sudden floods or eruptions, leaving barely a trace of their existence. The silence of these lost civilizations is deafening. The land bears faint, almost invisible imprints of ingenuity that were extinguished before permanent structures or records could be established. Some adaptations may have been subtle, invisible to modern excavation. Humans learned to predict seasonal shifts by observing animal migrations and plant cycles, developed strategies to ration scarce food, and discovered hidden water sources in drought-stricken regions. These techniques likely passed from one generation to the next through oral instruction, gestures, and imitation, creating ephemeral knowledge networks that could disappear entirely if a community perished. In this way, each climatic catastrophe not only tested survival but also determined which knowledge endured and which vanished. Volcanic winters and ice-driven famines forced humans into constant creativity. Hunting techniques adapted to the sudden scarcity of prey, toolmaking evolved to suit frozen or rugged terrain, and communal cooperation became essential in confronting the relentless unpredictability of nature. Each disaster was both a threat and a crucible, shaping the resilience, ingenuity, and social dynamics of early humans. Evidence of these vanished populations is patchy, leaving gaps in the narrative of human history where imagination must supplement archaeology. The story of this era is one of endurance in the face of relentless environmental upheaval, Entire civilizations may have arisen in fertile valleys or along rivers, only to disappear under layers of ash or ice. Their loss is almost total, yet the echoes remain in subtle ways. Fragments of tools, shifts in migration patterns, genetic legacies, and the enduring capacity for human adaptability. In contemplating these climatic catastrophes, one recognizes the fragility of human life against the backdrop of geological forces, and yet also marvels at the determination and ingenuity that allowed humans not just to survive, but to continue their journey across continents, leaving traces of a world we can scarcely reconstruct. As the millennia unfolded, humans pushed the boundaries of the known world, moving not only across continents, but eventually toward the uncharted expanses of water. The oceans, vast and unpredictable, presented challenges unlike anything encountered on land. Currents could sweep rafts off course in moments, storms could erupt without warning, and the horizon offered no familiar landmarks. Yet, driven by necessity, curiosity, or sheer audacity, early humans constructed simple watercraft, rafts bound with reeds, logs lashed together with vines, and later boats capable of carrying families and supplies across narrow straits and open seas. These crossings were not casual excursions, they were calculated risks, each journey a delicate negotiation with wind, wave, and the unknown. Navigating without compasses, charts, or written instruction demanded extraordinary observational skill. Travellers read the flight patterns of birds, noting which species returned daily from distant land. They studied the behaviour of fish and the colour of the water, interpreting subtle shifts as indicators of nearby land. Celestial cues, the rising and setting of the sun, the position of stars at night, guided them across vast distances, transforming the night sky into a map in constant motion. Every successful crossing reinforced knowledge that could be passed down orally, slowly building an invisible network of maritime understanding that stretched across generations and regions. The settlements they established on distant shores were remarkable in their adaptation. Islanders learned to exploit unfamiliar flora and fauna, discovering edible plants, harvesting shellfish, and tracking animals previously unknown. They developed tools suited to their new environment, fishing hooks from bone, nets woven from fibres, and traps for capturing agile creatures. These innovations, born of necessity, reflect both ingenuity and resilience. They also hint at social organisation, for such undertakings required cooperation, planning, and the sharing of knowledge, a collective effort to survive in isolation from the mainland. Yet evidence of these daring migrations is scarce. Archaeologists uncover isolated artefacts, a stone tool on a remote island, traces of a campfire beneath layers of sediment, or shells carved into ornaments. Each find is a window into journeys that would have been dangerous, painstaking and transformative. How early humans conceived of reaching unknown lands remains a mystery. Their courage and curiosity were immense, and the very act of leaving the familiar behind speaks to a relentless drive to explore and adapt. The human presence on these islands and continents predated previously accepted timelines, revealing a capacity for exploration far beyond what modern scholars once believed. Populations endured in isolation, shaping their environment and culture according to the constraints and opportunities they found. Their voyages were not guided by maps or compasses, yet they navigated with a combination of intuition, experience, and observation that rivals modern understanding of early navigation. In doing so, they laid the foundation for a human story that extended across oceans, connecting disparate lands long before the written word would record such exploits. The imagination conjures images of families and small bands setting out at dawn, pushing primitive rafts into rolling waves, eyes scanning for signs of land while storms gathered on the horizon. Each successful arrival meant survival, adaptation, and the possibility of thriving in a place untouched by humans. It also meant leaving behind the old world, carrying only knowledge, ingenuity, and resilience into environments that challenged every instinct and demanded constant innovation. These journeys across oceans remain one of the most extraordinary yet least understood chapters of human history, a testament to daring, creativity, and the boundless curiosity that has defined our species from the earliest days. In the dim recesses of caves and rocky shelters, early humans began to leave marks that transcended mere survival, hints of minds grappling with ideas, beliefs, and the unseen forces of their world. Walls bore streaks of ochre and charcoal, depicting animals in motion, abstract symbols, and figures whose meaning is now lost to time. Each stroke was deliberate, a silent testament to observation, imagination, and a desire to communicate something beyond the immediate needs of food and shelter. These artworks suggest that humans were not simply reacting to the environment, they were interpreting it, imagining it, and seeking to understand their place within it. Carvings on bones, stones, and wood also emerge sporadically, often in isolated locations that hint at special significance. Some appear to have been tools repurposed for symbolic expression. Others may have been ritual objects used in ceremonies or acts of remembrance. Burial practices hint at even deeper cognition. The careful placement of bodies, sometimes accompanied by tools, ornaments, or traces of pigment, suggests reverence, reflection, and perhaps a belief in an existence beyond life. These gestures reveal a capacity for abstract thought, empathy, and the recognition of continuity, qualities that form the foundation of culture. The scattered nature of these discoveries fuels fascination and frustration alike. Each site offers only a fragment of a story, leaving vast gaps that invite speculation. Were these images meant to educate, to honour the dead, to summon success in hunting, or to appease unseen forces? Did they tell the stories of everyday life, epic struggles, or mythic journeys? The absence of written records or consistent patterns makes it difficult to answer. What is clear is that humans of this era engaged in behaviours that suggest deep mental landscapes. Rituals and art were as integral to their existence as tools and fire. These expressions likely required collaboration, instruction, and repetition. The act of creating art in difficult-to-reach cave walls, for example, would demand coordination, scaffolding, and shared knowledge. Likewise, ritual practices, whether marking the passage of life or acknowledging death, point to social cohesion, moral codes, and a recognition of shared experience. In this sense, early humans were not merely surviving, they were constructing meaning, forging identities, and navigating the intangible dimensions of thought and belief. The fleeting nature of these cultural artifacts adds to their allure. Many artworks were lost to erosion, flooding, or human interference over millennia. Carvings faded or were buried, pigments washed away by water, and rituals left no permanent mark except in the imagination of observers. Modern humans encounter these traces like faint echoes, tantalizing glimpses into minds we can never fully comprehend. The mystery remains. What stories, lessons, or beliefs have been entirely erased? Which of these vanished practices shaped communities in ways we cannot reconstruct? And how might they have influenced behaviour, social organisation, or even survival strategies? In considering this, one begins to appreciate the complexity of prehistoric life. Survival and ingenuity alone do not capture the full scope of human existence. Art and ritual reveal that early humans were thinkers, storytellers, and observers of the ineffable. They sought to leave a mark, to record experience, and to interpret forces beyond their immediate comprehension. Though the majority of these creations are lost to history, the fragments that remain offer a glimpse of a world in which imagination, spirituality, and social cohesion played as vital a role as hunting and gathering. The mystery of these sporadic expressions continues to captivate, reminding us that the lost 100,000 years were filled with minds capable of wonder, reflection, and abstraction. In those darkened caves and silent burial sites, humans were engaging in the earliest forms of culture, reaching towards something greater than survival, and leaving behind traces of thought that challenge the modern imagination to reconstruct lives and beliefs long vanished from memory. The passage of time has proven to be both a preserver and a destroyer of human history. Across continents, entire settlements that may have flourished for generations have been swallowed by shifting soils, floods, or volcanic ash. Rivers changed course, washing away evidence of campsites, winds and rains eroded shelters once carved into rock, and the relentless advance of vegetation obscured tracks and hearths that might once have offered insight into daily life. Even human activity has played its part later. Populations scavenged stone tools, altered landscapes, or built over ancient sites, inadvertently erasing traces of those who came before. What survives is often fragmented, tantalizingly incomplete, and difficult to interpret, leaving modern archaeologists to piece together puzzles from mere shards. The challenge is immense. Excavations reveal scattered stone points, the charred remnants of fires, or impressions in soft sediments, each requiring careful analysis to determine age, function, and context. Yet the majority of what humans left behind has been lost, leaving holes in the narrative that may never be filled. Even when multiple artifacts are discovered, connecting them into a coherent story is speculative. Without written records or continuous occupation, the meaning behind each find is elusive. Researchers must infer behavior from material traces, reconstruct social organization from the positioning of objects, and estimate population movements from subtle environmental clues. Each interpretation is tentative, hypothesis constructed on the edge of certainty. In some instances, entire civilizations may have disappeared without leaving even the faintest impression. Temporary shelters, campsites used for only a season, or small bands of hunters may have left behind nothing but a few tools scattered across a plain. The landscapes that once teemed with human presence have returned to nature, concealing centuries of activity beneath layers of soil and debris. With every century that passes, the probability of uncovering intact evidence diminishes, making the effort to understand the lost 100,000 years increasingly urgent and simultaneously more frustrating. This scarcity of material has profound implications. Are we truly uncovering history, or are we merely glimpsing fragments of forgotten worlds? The artifacts that survive may reflect only the most durable or widely used objects, leaving entire aspects of culture, belief, and social organization invisible. Technologies, rituals, and forms of knowledge that were transient in nature, passed orally, practiced briefly, or left in perishable materials, may be entirely lost to us. What reaches the present is filtered by chance, survival, and decay, selection dictated not by significance but by durability. Despite these limitations, each discovery carries immense value. A single flint point can suggest migration patterns. A hearth can illuminate diet and social interaction. A shell ornament can hint at trade or symbolic expression. Archaeologists labour painstakingly to extract these whispers from the soil, using careful excavation, chemical analysis, and comparison to reconstruct timelines and behaviours. The work is slow and deliberate, requiring both scientific precision and imaginative empathy to bridge the gaps between evidence and narrative. The disappearing clues of prehistory compel us to confront the vast unknown. The lost 100,000 years are punctuated by moments of insight, but overwhelmingly defined by absence. Every artifact uncovered is a victory over time, yet it represents only a fraction of what once was. The endeavour forces modern humans to navigate between certainty and speculation, piecing together stories from shadows and accepting that the vast majority of human experience from this era may remain forever beyond reach. It is a humbling reminder that history is never complete, that human ingenuity and culture have long existed in forms both ephemeral and enduring, and that much of the world our ancestors inhabited remains tantalizingly invisible. Beneath the surface of our visible history lies a second record, written not on stone or in clay, but in the strands of DNA passed down through countless generations. Within these microscopic sequences, scientists have begun to uncover astonishing stories of interbreeding, migration, and survival, revealing a hidden ancestry that traditional archaeology could scarcely imagine. Modern humans carry fragments of Neanderthal and Denisovan DNA, subtle imprints of encounters that occurred tens of thousands of years ago. These genetic echoes are not merely curiosities, they shaped adaptation, immunity, and perhaps even cognitive abilities, leaving traces of lives, decisions, and alliances long vanished from memory. DNA analysis has illuminated migration patterns that defy earlier assumptions. Genes reveal journeys across continents, the interweaving of populations previously thought to be isolated, and the survival of lineages that may have endured harsh climates, famine, and conflict. Each genetic marker is a breadcrumb hinting at human networks, encounters, and expansions that left no architectural or written record. In some regions, populations show unexpected admixtures, evidence of long-forgotten crossings and unions that challenge traditional narratives. These findings suggest that human history was far more interconnected and dynamic than the fragmentary archaeological record alone can convey. Yet the genetic record has its limitations. While it can indicate movement, mixing, and some aspects of adaptation, it cannot reveal the cultures, beliefs, rituals, or social structures that defined early communities. Entire civilizations may leave no trace in DNA beyond a few markers, and knowledge of technologies, art or language is largely irretrievable. Genetics hints at what occurred but cannot fully reconstruct the human experience. It is a skeleton of history, skeletal and silent, offering outlines where stories, emotions, and daily life remain inaccessible. Even so, these invisible threads allow us to imagine connections across vast expanses of space and time. DNA tells of a mother in Central Asia whose descendants travelled thousands of miles to the edges of Europe, of populations that adapted to high altitudes in Asia through inherited genes, of interactions between humans and other hominins that changed the very blueprint of our species. These revelations add depth to the human narrative, suggesting that survival, movement, and adaptation were collaborative processes, shaped not by a single group or culture, but by networks of humans whose lives intersected in ways only partially visible to us today. In contemplating these genetic echoes, the mystery of the lost 100,000 years grows more profound. We see footprints of existence, interconnections, and inherited traits, yet the stories themselves remain largely untold. What myths, philosophies, or complex societies accompanied these genetic exchanges? What forms of art, ritual, or communal knowledge have vanished entirely, leaving no imprint beyond DNA? The mind struggles to reconstruct a civilization from markers that are both intimate and abstract, human and mathematical, precise and incomplete. Ultimately, genetics offers a humbling perspective on human history. It reveals that the past is neither linear nor isolated, that every modern human carries the legacy of countless interactions, migrations, and adaptations that stretch back into darkness. Yet even as we decode these sequences, the full richness of early human life, its culture, complexity, and genius, remains tantalizingly out of reach. Our DNA is both a map and a mystery, a reminder that the lost 100,000 years contain worlds of experience that persist in hidden ways, shaping who we are, while leaving much of their story forever beyond our grasp. The lost 100,000 years of human history stretch across the mind like an immense canvas, painted in shades both visible and invisible. Archaeology, genetics, and paleontology offer glimpses of a world that once teemed with ingenuity, courage, and adaptability. Yet each discovery only illuminates a fraction of the story. Across continents and oceans, humans migrated, adapted, and innovated, leaving behind traces in stone, bone, and DNA that hint at remarkable achievements, and at mysteries that will likely remain forever unsolved. The more we uncover, the more we realize how vast the gaps remain, how much of human experience has been swallowed by time, climate, or the simple fragility of evidence. In imagining these centuries before recorded history, one sees humans as explorers, inventors, and thinkers, navigating landscapes of ice, fire, and unknown waters. They tamed fire, crafted tools, and developed early technologies whose complexity we can barely reconstruct. They created art, performed rituals, and nurtured social bonds, revealing minds capable of abstraction, creativity, and reflection. In meeting other human species, they exchanged knowledge, interbred, and left genetic legacies that persist within us today. These lives, lived in a world without writing, cities, or permanence, were no less rich or sophisticated than those chronicled in later civilizations. They were simply lost to the eye and preserved only faintly in fragmentary evidence and the silent record of DNA. The enduring mystery lies in the sheer scope of what we cannot know. For every cave painting or tool, countless others have vanished, eroded by wind and water, buried beneath sediments, or destroyed by later human activity. Entire communities may have risen and fallen without leaving more than a whisper of their existence. What beliefs guided them? What technologies or social structures might they have perfected, only to disappear entirely? How did their imagination shape their perception of the world, their survival strategies, and their interactions with each other? Science can provide hints, but the lives, dreams, and stories of these people are ultimately beyond full reconstruction. Yet there is wonder in that uncertainty. The lost 100,000 years remind us that human history is not confined to what is recorded in texts or preserved in ruins. It extends into shadows, into lives lived quietly but profoundly, where courage, ingenuity, and creativity thrive despite the absence of monuments or chronicles. Each fragment we uncover, be it a stone tool, a cave painting, a burial, or a genetic marker, is a small victory over the erasure of time, offering insight into the extraordinary adaptability and persistence of our species. In reflecting on this vanished past, we're compelled to acknowledge the limits of our knowledge while celebrating the remarkable resilience of humanity. The mysteries of these ancient millennia encourage curiosity, imagination, and humility, reminding us that the story of our species is far richer and more complex than any single discovery can convey. Countless secrets remain buried beneath layers of earth, waiting for chance, diligence, or insight to bring them into light. What civilizations, inventions, or ideas might still lie hidden, lost to memory but preserved in subtle traces. The thought is both humbling and thrilling, leaving the mind to wander through possibilities as boundless as time itself, marveling at the depths of human history we may never fully know. The lost 100,000 years endure as a testament to human ingenuity, courage, and mystery. A silent, sprawling narrative that challenges us to imagine, to explore, and to cherish the fragments we uncover, while accepting that the full story may forever remain just beyond reach.